رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي.
Okay, so A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We are continuing on with the 23rd word, first chapter. The fourth point, belief makes man into man. Indeed, it makes man into a king. Since this is so, man's basic duty is belief and supplication. Unbelief makes him into an extremely impotent beast. Unbelief makes him into an extremely impotent beast. Out of thousands of proofs of this matter, the differences in the ways animals and men come into the world are a clear indication and decisive proof. Out of thousands of proofs of this matter, the differences in the ways animals and men come into the world are a clear indication and decisive proof. Yes, these differences show that humanity becomes humanity through belief. Humanity becomes humanity through belief. For when animals come into the world, they come complete in all points, in accordance with their abilities, as though having been perfected in another world. That is, they are sent. They learn all the conditions of their lives, the relationships with the universe, and the laws of life in either 2 hours or 2 days or 2 months, and become proficient in them. Animals like sparrow and bees acquire in 20 days the power to survive and proficiency in their actions that man only acquires in 20 years. Animals like sparrows and bees acquire in 20 days the power to survive and proficiency in their actions that man only acquires in 20 years. That is, they are inspired with them. This means that the animal's fundamental duty is not to be perfected through learning and progress by acquiring knowledge, nor to seek help and offer supplications through displaying their impotence, but in accordance with their abilities to work and act. This means that the animal's fundamental duty is not to be perfected through learning and progress by acquiring knowledge, nor to seek help and offer supplications through displaying their impotence, but in accordance with their abilities to work and act. Their duty is active worship. As for man, he needs to learn everything when he comes into the world. He is ignorant and cannot even learn completely the conditions of life in 20 years. Man, he needs to learn everything when he comes into the world. He is ignorant and cannot even learn completely the conditions of life in 20 years. Indeed, he needs to go on learning till the end of his life. Indeed, he needs to go on learning till the end of his life. Also, he's sent to the world in a most weak and impotent form, and can only rise to his feet in 1 or 2 years. Only in 15 years can he distinguish between harm and benefit, and with the help of mankind's experience, attract things advantageous to him and avoid others that are harmful. This means that man's innate duty is to be perfected through learning and to proclaim his worship of God and servitude to him through supplication. Man's innate duty is to be perfected through learning and to proclaim his worship of God and servitude to him through supplication. That is to say, it is to know the answers of the questions. Through whose compassion is my life so wisely administered in this way? Through whose compassion is my life so wisely administered in this way? Through whose generosity am I so kindly raised? Through whose graciousness am I so delicately nurtured and ministered to? It is to beseech and supplicate the provider of needs through the tongue of impotence and poverty. It is to seek from him. It is to fly to the high station of worship and servitude to God on the wings of impotence and poverty. This means that man came to this world to be perfected by means of knowledge and supplication. In regard to his nature and abilities, everything is tied to knowledge. And the foundation, source, light, and spirit of all true knowledge is knowledge of God, and its essence and basis is belief in God. And the foundation, source, light, and spirit of all true knowledge is knowledge of God, and its essence and the essence of knowledge and basis is belief in God. Furthermore, since man is subject to endless tribulations and afflicted with innumerable enemies, despite his boundless impotence, and suffers from endless needs and has innumerable desires despite his boundless poverty, after belief, his fundamental innate duty is supplication. Since man is subject to endless tribulations and afflicted with innumerable enemies despite his boundless impotence, and suffers from endless needs and has innumerable desires despite his boundless poverty, after belief, his fundamental innate duty is supplication. As for supplication, it is the basis of worship of God and servitude to him. In order to secure a desire or wish he cannot obtain, a child will either cry or ask for it, that is, he will supplicate through the tongue of his impotence, either actively or verbally, and will be successful in securing it. In the same way, man is like a delicate, petted child in the world of living creatures. He has to either weep at the court of the most merciful and compassionate one through his weakness and impotence, or supplicate through his poverty and need, so that the things he wants may be made subject to him, or he may offer thanks for their being made so. So man has to either weep at the court of the most merciful and compassionate one through his weakness and impotence, or supplicate through his poverty and need, so that the things he wants may be made subject to him, or he may offer thanks for their being made so. Otherwise, like a silly child who creates a fuss over a fly, saying, "With my own strength, I subjugate things," it is not possible to subjugate and things 1,000 times more powerful, and I make them obey me through my own ideas and measures. With my own strength, I subjugate things. It is not possible to subjugate any things 1,000 times more powerful, and I make them obey me through my own ideas and measures. He displays ingratitude for the bounties. And just as this is contrary to man's innate nature, so he makes himself deserving of severe punishment. He displays ingratitude for the bounties, and just as this is contrary to man's innate nature, so he makes himself deserving of severe punishment. And that is the end to the fourth point. This was a long one. I'll take a pause and see what everybody has to say. So feel free, go ahead to share out your immediate takeaways.
Jazakallah khair. Anyone from here wants to share their initial thoughts, or from online participants? No? Okay. So any volunteer for the fifth point? It looks like it was so clear. Then I will just make a very quick summary and maybe pose a few questions, hoping that it's going to open up people's mouth. So in the fourth point, author starts with making a bold statement saying that belief makes man into man. Indeed, it makes man into a king. So it's a very bold statement. He is going to justify this, but right at the beginning I can pose a few questions such as, what does it mean, man becoming a man, or even becoming a king? Why is he using this word king in here? What does it signify? One question there. Then I continue. Since this is so, man's basic duty is belief and supplication. This is the second bold claim, as if man being a man by belief and supplication. Why is that so? He's going to give some examples about this, but this would be a second question. Then he makes a third claim: unbelief makes man into an extremely impotent beast. Unbelief makes man into an extremely impotent beast, or an animal. So unbelief makes human into an animal, but an impotent animal, but not only an animal, but a beast, like a wild animal. Why is that? So this is the third question. So it looks like there are three major statements that he is making here. If anybody would like to pick up from any of them, considering the following three paragraphs, or maybe four paragraphs, he is explaining these three statements. If anybody wants to pick up one of these statements, you are more than welcome. Okay, Fariha, please go ahead.
Okay, so the first one, trying to understand what is the author trying to say with belief makes man into man. Indeed, it makes man into a king. So the way I'm looking into it is I'm going backwards a little bit. So I'm starting with makes man into a king. I mean, we all know, what it's like to be treated like royalty, or what it's like to live a life where, let's say, you're royalty, right? So I'll start with an analogy of this universe being a palace, and I'm the guest here, as in everything is provided for my needs. I'm made to breathe. I'm presented with different manifestations, like I see sunlight, I see the moon, and so on and so forth, right? So really pondering over just like we may call it basic necessities, or act out there, then we can realize that we are being served. So what goes on with a king is being served, right? Everybody's at your service, just like a child, everybody's at his or her service. So same thing with us, like we are being served every moment. I mean, we may not realize it, but really, if we think about it, like just pondering over one's breathing, like what is serving me? Am I like in control of my respiratory system? No, I'm not. So just pondering over that, I feel that, yeah, we are being served. The universe is at our service, right? So from there, if I realize all of this, then I know that there must be a one that is the host, or is hosting me, and just executing this conclusion within me makes me into a man, where I'm like reasoning and reasoning in the right way, where I'm extracting meaning from my existence, and that would make belief. And I'll just pause here for the first statement, and that's all I wanted to share. Thank you for listening.
Jazakallah khair. And I can see the unseen hand of Asim Do I see it correctly? Awesome.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Go ahead.
You know, this to add on to what has been said so far about the making man into man or makes man into a king. As Asfaria was explaining it also, it's interesting how, you know, if Asfaria said if we realize it, that everything is serving us. Normally, you know, if we think about it, the convention, which is out in the society, is if we are there to serve God, but really, if you think about it, actually, we are being served here by all the different in our existence, and the way we are treated, and really with all the different things that we are experiencing, although it's not necessarily always good, or, you know, we may label them as good or bad or whatever based on our personal preferences, but everything is there just for us to experience. Like just as Faria said, the whole universe is there for us to experience. But interestingly enough, you know, there was a conversation I was having with someone, and this person was okay with, you know, with being identified as an animal, you know, like the whole concept of a social animal, which the civilization sometimes or many times promotes. So it was really, you know, hard, or at least for me, to continue any conversation with someone who cannot really see or value what a human being is. Because if you see that, you know, it's interesting how the author actually says the differences, although everything that I see in the society tries to make the similarities, but there's a huge difference in terms of the way, as the author points out, in terms of the learning, and also in terms of the abilities and the consciousness and the ability to reason and think and memory. All those things are just amazingly too much for, like, you cannot compare them to any other being. So that's one thing. And the sentence about, so man's basic duty is belief and supplication. So yeah, I think that's what the author wants to point out. I think in the fourth point, this is, I think, the highlight of this point, that what is really man here for by experiencing all these things is just to, you know, this is the differentiating factor of what man is capable of. It's not by doing things, but it's by this concept of belief, which again, you know, is something that I think is the specialty of this author, as far as I've seen. So he makes you realize more and more in terms of how you can, you know, the abilities that you have as a human being, and how you can come to realize who you are, and then through yourself you can realize that you are given all those things by a source who is treating you graciously and mercifully. Yeah, so that's my highlight for at least this so far.
Jazakallah khair. So another point that is a question mark for me is, he says unbelief makes man into an extremely impotent beast. It sounds like a contradictory statement. Beasts are not impotent in general, like a lion is a beast, but it is the king of the forest, or I don't know, any sort of wild beasts are really not that impotent. Like if he says makes it into an impotent sheep, impotent rabbit, he says impotent beast. I don't know, another question that might be thought about. I guess in general, in order to clarify his point, he is, so what does he mean by man becoming a man is, what is the not or negation of this? Man can become a animal. So how does a man become an animal without belief? Fariha and Asim made comments about this. If anybody wants to add anything further, on-site participants? No. Hatice, Beyza, Nurbanu, and then Fariha.
It's Nurbanu. I think I just realized with this beast analogy how like deeply ingrained belief has to be for it to, I guess, like fully manifest in our lives, or for it to count. Because I don't know if the writer would agree with this, but it seems like just saying or doing things that a quote-unquote believer would do is not necessarily enough, right, to get us out of this beast mode. So, I mean, I think it connects with a lot of the other things he writes, but this kind of scale between impotent beast and king seems like it's not a binary, but that means that makes sense because we're always trying to perfect. And I really like that passage where he says, until the end of your life, you're kind of in need of this perfecting. But it just kind of reaffirmed for me that just saying I believe or just going through the motions is not enough to get you out of that lack of potential, right? So there needs to be a deep, like, lifelong investment to be in that king or even like man status. Yeah.
Go ahead, Fariha.
Okay, yeah. So the question that was asked, what makes man into an animal? Well, it's a long one, but I'm looking into that sentence that made us question what makes man into an animal. So if you look into unbelief makes him into an extremely impotent beast. Strong use of wordings, extremely, impotent, and beast. Okay, so let's start with the middle word, impotent. Regardless of what we are, right, or what one consider themselves, animal, plant, tree, doesn't matter, man, human, whatever. We are in need. We are impotent. We are weak. So that's a given. Anything that is in creation or that is brought into existence is in need to be created. It's weak in its existence. It's impotent, helpless. I cannot do anything. And so beast is as in, doesn't matter, like, again, strong use of I guess the king of the animal kingdom. But anyhow, if I'm not, so unbelief makes, if I don't realize, if I don't recognize that I am being taken care of and that I have a host that is giving me existence, and I feel like, oh, that's it, here I am, happen to be in existence, without any meaning, purpose, really without making any connection, like a vertical connection with the source of my existence, then when can I go on? I cannot go on, because every moment I'm subject to change. Things are passing, transient. I cannot even hold on to anything, right? even though I feel like, yeah, I'm in control, you know, but no, like everybody dies. We're dying every moment, but like everybody, you know, can I stop my death? No, like I'll die. So really, I guess death in itself is like the main significant event that put things in perspective for me, that, hey, like I'm thinking that I am here by myself. No, I'm totally helpless. So just realizing that I cannot control anything with what I'm experiencing, you know, should bring me like a little bit on the right track. Otherwise, yes, I'm still needy, but I don't have anything to hold on to. So unbelief makes him into an extremely impotent beast. Yes, I'm needy in this case, but I don't know. I feel helpless, and I totally feel helpless, but because I don't have anything to hold on to or to rely on. So that would make man into an animal. But that was just the way I understood it. I would be curious to see how others understand it as well.
So, author is again speaking in black and white terms, and he is contrasting belief and unbelief here. And in the original text for unbelief, he uses kufr. So it's a very deliberate choice of rejection, or being very firm in terms of not affirming, as if covering up some truth that I don't want to accept it for some reason, whatever is the reason. So this is turning me into a beast, as if. So I guess if I am, let's say, at a phase of unsure what's going on, maybe it's not exactly unbelief in this case. Still, let's say I am searching for something. I neither have an affirmation nor a rejection. So is this still going to make me a beast? Or, since he's using this very strong term of beast, but an impotent beast, so it's like a contradictory. It is beast because if I am knowingly and willingly rejecting, so although I see as if in this existence there's some sort of an order, but maybe because that I want to have some sort of an ownership in this existence, and I feel like they're not giving me any share, I'm not given any share, and I'm angry with this. Therefore, I would like to deny that it is being given. So in this case, I truly want to destroy things. Because if it is not mine, it shouldn't be anybody's. So I guess this feeling of the willingness to destroy anything, because at every single step I am getting closer to death. But this is going to be my end. So the world is not going to stay for me. So shall it stay for anybody else? I mean, I am having this animosity towards anything in this existence, because I feel like I was worthy of owning them, and now nothing is staying in my hand. So this sort of an attitude truly makes me a beast. I mean, internally, I don't know if I manifest it outside or not, but internally I want to damage everything, as if I would like to take a revenge from the one that is giving existence to me and to everything as well. But then I am impotent, because I'm not able to damage anything either. Within my own world, I am this beast, really. I want to destroy everything as it. So I guess this is, of course, a very black and white picture, again, I am drawing, because I'm trying to find where I am in this picture. So, because am I 100% a believer, or are there things which I don't want to admit? For example, when I am jealous of someone, internally, what does this feeling imply? So let's say my friend has a car which is better than mine, and I am jealous and I'm jealous of my friend's car, let's say. I mean, since everybody more or less have tasted the jealousy. So what does jealousy tell me? Jealousy tells me that I was deserving this, but it's not given to me. So again, I admit that it is being given, but it's not given to me. So I am angry with the one that gives it, and I want to just deny or destroy because it didn't go as I wished it to go. So what's happening? I mean, either, if possible, physically, but because of society, I'm not going and breaking his car's window. But from inside, I'm saying that, oh, if only I had a chance. Or, may Allah protect, if he goes and makes a accident, I'm saying that, well, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to be happy. I don't say that I am happy from outside, but inside there is some sort of a relief as it. So I guess this is really the beast in there, which is being an enemy to the whole existence, because it's since it's not mine, then I'm becoming an enemy. So I guess this can be extrapolated to, I mean, since this feeling is very familiar, but this can be extrapolated to being jealous with anything in this existence. Even when you see birds which are happily chirping, and if I am unhappy, I'm going to be jealous of the birds and say that, why are they singing while I am so upset about life, about my job, this and that? So I guess this beast might be somewhere there. Please go ahead.
The idea of impotent beast reminded me, who's the character in Lord of the Rings? Like Boromir was the guy, the father?
Yeah, Boromir.
Yeah, okay. The father of the Boromir. He's, sorry?
They're not for.
Okay, so we have our expertise. Alhamdulillah. He's a substitute for a king, right? So anyway, he's old, he's sick, and everything being served to him. So when you look at from the outside, he's just an impotent being. He cannot even think properly, cannot even walk properly. But at the same time, everything is being served to him. And as author describes, this is the state of the man, regardless of his or her unbelief or belief. Everyone is being served. So we have all these bounties given to us. But what is changing, I guess, from a believer perspective and unbeliever perspective, the manners that I approach to these bounties, that what is served to me. So I can devour them, eat them like an animal, like a beast, just like this guy was doing in one scene when he was eating cherry tomato.
Cherry tomato.
Yes. So we can approach all these bounties in that manner. I am important, but at the same time I'm like a beast with an ingratitude, or with a belief perspective, I take them as bounties, gifts given to me, and be thankful, grateful. I guess also authors at the very end, he describes something similar where he says, although everything is being served to a human being because he constantly cries, but then as soon as he gets them, he just starts chewing them and making this ugly scene. So maybe we can understand being impotent beast in a similar way.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, go ahead, Hatice Beyza, move on.
Assalamu alaikum. I think a little bit more generally, I was thinking about how man being made into man is kind of like there being a mold for man. So I have the label of being a human being, but there is also a mold in which a human being fits. So if in my recognition of the mold and in my actively working towards fitting that mold, then I think would equate to belief. And I think this and supplication, and this requires further explanation. But at the same time, I was thinking of beastly, extremely impotent beast. And adding on to what Faria said, regardless of whether or not one fits the mold in a manly form, if you will, or a humanly form or a beastly form, there's always a sense of impotence. But regardless of that, the beast aspect of it, I don't think is beast in the sense that like a lion or a like some sort of predator, but rather one that is beastly to a human being, one that does not fit the mold. So anything not able to be tamed, says a friend here. Not something that is contrary to what my instinct and what my nature, as the way I have been created, pushes me towards. But of course, I think inshallah with the further discussions we can further, and we've already started to discuss what exactly is it then that makes man fit into this mold of man, or not fit into it and become into a beastly form, which is anything other than that which man is meant to become, or the purpose for which man is to fulfill.
Jazakallah khair. So then I will quickly read the next two paragraphs to see how he is describing animals. Out of thousands of proofs of this matter, like these first three statements, the differences in the ways animals and men come into the world are a clear and decisive proof. Yes, these differences show that humanity becomes humanity through belief. For when animals come into the world, they come complete in all points and in accordance with their abilities, as though having been perfected in another world. That is, they are sent. That is, they are sent as such. They learn all the conditions of their lives, their relationships with the universe, and the laws of life in either 2 hours or 2 days or 2 months, and become proficient in them. Animals like sparrows and bees acquire in 20 days the power to survive and proficiency in their actions that man only acquires in 20 years. That is, they are inspired with them. This means that the animal's fundamental duty is not to be perfected through learning and progress by acquiring knowledge, nor to seek help and offer supplications through displaying their impotence. But animals' fundamental duty is in accordance with their abilities to work and act. Their duty is active worship. Any comments about this picture that the author is describing for animal?
There are two things. Maybe I should share one now, maybe later the second one. I guess we should separate when he talks about the animal here. I'm not sure if he's describing the animal or beast he used at the very beginning. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm taking this beast as something different than this animal he's talking about. This is a small point. But another thing, just about the animals, when you read it again, it reminded me sometimes for corporates, when they need a consultation in a specific topic. They ask for experts in the domain. Sometimes they just hire a new person, just expert in a specific topic, and bring him or her. And if he's really good expert, is really good in his or her job, it takes a few days or weeks to learn the environment, the corporate, how it works, and then you give them the consultation and usually make them better in something. So the author is describing something similar, like the animals. They just come to this world in a few days, a few weeks, they become this expert of their environment, or as if they already knew what to do. They just need to adapt to a new environment and then start working. So yeah, I already like animals, I already respect them, but looking from this angle, it's a different kind of respect that, I don't know, it made me respect them more, let's say.
They're experts.
Yeah. There is something else, maybe more important than what I just said, but I will wait for others if there are other comments.
Any other comments? Apparently, out of this picture, the author says they are not supposed to perfect whatever they are doing. And he concludes, their duty is active worship, or their duty is to work and act in accordance with their abilities. Well, learning is not part of their job description. It looks like there's no other comment. Maybe you should tell your other comment.
So the whole idea of human becoming human, or human transforming into something else, and the whole idea of learning, the progress, I guess by itself it's so important, so crucial to understand ourselves. It's as if telling that there is no such thing as human at the beginning of your journey. It's just a potentiality, and you take your form through the journey. So you become human at the very end, if you can. So it's an endless process of learning, transforming, being transformed, and so on. And it reminds me the verses when our Creator says, like, we created you and then give you form. We created you and then defined your fate, defined your path, and put you on this path and then lead you on this path. Such verses. So for human, it's a process, it's a progress that we have to take, we have to make. And this strong emphasis on learning, I guess it's so important, it changes everything. It's like, and when you read the paragraph, the next paragraph, he talks about that I need to know, I need to learn. Who is that person who's serving me? Whatever, like the first person perspective. I need to learn, I need to become someone, I need to become something. So he puts this extreme emphasis on self-fulfillment. Right? You cannot describe yourself as, I am this kind of person, I am this kind of, I don't know, the creature, because you're changing all the time. So when at the very beginning, Asim was saying, he was talking a friend, describing human as a social animal. Yes, this is maybe a wrong description, but on the other side, if we try to describe human, with some generic terms, regardless we use the creator in the picture or not, it will, again, not at least complete. Because every man has to fulfill his or her destiny. We should become something. We should become human. And the way I will become human, it will probably be slightly different than the way you will become human. This is one part of it. But at the same time, what he does, this is interesting. Like, maybe I'm just jumping ahead, sorry for that. But he also talks about the conditions of life. He says animals can learn as conditions of life what they're supposed to do in a few days, but for men it takes 20 years, for instance, it says. So yes, you have to become something your own, but at the same time you're not left to yourself as well. So there is something that you should reach. You cannot define your goals, you cannot define your path, but you have to discover them yourself. So you cannot just say, I define myself this way and this is what I'm supposed to be. No, it's like, as the author says, it's the conditions of the life, they are set for you. You have to become human, whatever it means, but you have to become human. I cannot become human for you. You have to become human. I don't know, like this way of looking at human becoming human, or human having all these endless learning. This is not something taken, this is not something that we can lightly.
Take lightly.
I think it's so crucial, so important.
So this reminds me of like maybe a metaphor for what's being said in here. So if we replace human with student, for example, studying makes student a student, and partying, because instead of not studying, it is because unbelief is not like being neutral or just not thinking. Unbelief is just going to the exact opposite. So partying makes student into a beast, whatever. So, and in this case, for example, being a student is what the student is disposed for. Like even if you become a professor, still you are a student, as long as you think like it's my duty to study and learn more. So as long as I'm on this path, I'm always a student. So belief makes human as a human. So, or description of human is the one that believes. Likewise, student is the one who studies. So this sort of a relation is there, I guess. And throughout the way of, at any moment of the journey, you are a human as long as I take belief as this is what makes me human. This is the thing that makes me different from being an animal, and it looks like there's no middle ground. So either I'm going to become a beast by going against belief, or if I go with belief, then I'm going to become a human. If there is no comment, we will ask Abdurrahman to read the next paragraph.
I have a question.
Good. This is the way to extract questions from people. Go ahead.
And then it says their duty is active worship. I'm trying to understand how Nursi comes to this conclusion, because, okay, there's no way you can speak to an insect, a bird, an animal, and, do you have a consciousness of God that you're impotent, that you're actually following him? Are you actively worshiping in this way? He doesn't know that. He's looking at it and he's somehow coming to a conclusion that these animals are actively worshiping. And I'm just wondering, what does he mean by actively worshiping? How can he conclude this? Because I was thinking in my mind, when we look at like an ant colony, I guess because we learned that way, we'd say, yeah, they're worshiping, they're a perfect example, they know their creator, you know, this and that. They're carrying these huge, I don't know, food, and they're living in structure. But then if I was on top of the Empire State Building, and I was looking down and I see humans as ants as well, but I wouldn't say they were worshiping. So like, how can I come to the conclusion when I look at ants that they're worshiping?
Good. Any comments, people? The ants. Go ahead, please.
Do we have any ants among participants?
2 humans raised their hand. I hope you were not walking in New York City when Abraham was on top of the Empire State. But please go ahead, Hatice.
I don't know, again, if this will answer his question. But I think even worship kind of has to be digested or like kind of taken apart in order to try to understand this. But backtracking just a little bit, what I found interesting in the text was like its emphasis on learning. So it seems to me that one of the arguments the author is making is that since this within like the lifetime of an animal or a sparrow, for example, they acquire the skills necessary to continue living in a very short period of time. And then they stop there and they just repeat the same actions over and over again. Whereas there's a contrast when it comes to humanity, because not only does it take them a long time to just, get the basics down of survival, or, people not knowing how to cook even after their 20s or 30s, but also like learning in the sense that there is no plateau, if you will. There is no like this, I've learned this much and this is the most that I can know. There's if we go back to the concepts of like potentiality, we have this unending potentiality, and it's our lifetime that limits us from transforming that limitedly into actual ability. But whereas with animals, it's like there is this one point and then they hit that in a relatively short period of time, and then they continue with that. So I think learning then becomes some sort of like conscious act of recognizing one's own, I guess for one thing, potentiality, and seeking answers to their need for desire and permanence. So when it says this means that the animal's fundamental duty is not to be perfected through learning and progress by acquiring knowledge, nor to seek help and offer supplications through displaying their impotence, but in accordance with their abilities to work and act. So here the author is also saying that the human being is then, their duty is perfection through learning and progress by acquiring knowledge, seeking help and offering supplication through displaying their impotence. Whereas with the animal, it's through work and act. So like the work and act and worship then becomes the purpose of their life. So their duty is to, I guess, grow a little bit in a very short period of time, and they reach their level of maturity, and then just repeating those actions becomes a sort of worship for them. Whereas for us, because we have this endless potentiality, constantly striving to reach that, or constantly striving to improve ourselves, then becomes worship for us. But I think there's a change in spheres, or like different levels that we're speaking here.
Abdurrahman, are you okay with the answer? Otherwise, you would read.
I can read.
If you have further questions,
I can make comments so that yeah, yeah, sure. So the way I understand when author says their duty is active worship, he may or may not, I don't know, but it seems to me like he doesn't say that I'm looking at the animals and imagining them, raising their hands. Oh, our glorious Maker, thank you for the food you're giving us. Although personally I don't see it as something stupid or silly. I don't, just as a side note. But I don't think he's talking about this here. I think when he says their duty is active worship, in a simplest level, he means I'm looking at the animals that are constantly working. They're just, doing what they are supposed to do. And it doesn't take them too long to do that. And by looking at this, you see the end coming into existence, it's born. A few days later, maybe hours, I don't know about the ends, it starts working. And you say, that means its purpose was coming here and working. When you see a human being, you look at the child, she doesn't do anything. She's not working. She's trying to learn something, have to return, and then have to cry, have to ask. And then it's not enough. She has to go to school to learn some other stuff. And you look at her and say that, it seems like her purpose was learning. Because she's not doing anything. At the simplest level. Right? When you look at the animals, when you look at the human, this is the difference you see. But going deeper, so when you start questioning what it means working, what it means doing something, right? Then as you realize that doing something is nothing but worshiping, so whatever you do, it's a worship, according to his terminology at least, as far as I understand. So your heart is pumping, like doing an action. It's a means of worshiping. You walking, it's a means of worshiping. You want to walk. You will to walk, and it's being created for you. So everything you do is a worship. Therefore, I guess he's saying that their duty is active worship. What kind of worship is the active one, meaning doing something? Learning is another kind of worship. Or asking, by raising your hand is another kind of worship. But working is one kind of worship.
If there's no consciousness, how is it worship? If you're just walking?
So again, so you can argue that they also have worship consciousness or not, but even if without that, so the way you define worship, as you would maybe remember, the way he defines the worship, a plant needs water. And water is there, somehow travels to plant. So how you describe this scene, the author says, by just being in need of water, plant is in worship. And the water is given to the plant. So you're trying to explain the action there, and the author uses the word worship to emphasize that it's not plant that takes the water. It was its need, and the water is given to the plant. This process he defines as one kind of worship. With the animals, it's the same thing. They're doing something, they're willing to do something, or they just, you see them in constant action, and something is built out of it. And you ask the question, who is doing this? Is it animals building something? The author says no, they're just worshiping, and whatever is built is being created for them. So asking and sustenance, he defines as worship. And he says you cannot explain otherwise. How can you explain an ant colony building their perfect mansion under the earth? Can you say, oh, they probably plot their plans and then, they organized within themselves and they have power to create all this stuff that they're using? He said, no, you cannot explain that way. The only way you can explain is they probably, like from my perspective, they're probably asking for it and it's being created. How else you would explain? This is what I understand from active prayer. Like when I, for instance, go to work. Can you say that I walk to work, I sit on the desk, I moved my fingers in front of the computer, and all these actions created my sustenance? Or, as an alternative, you say by walking, by sitting, by waiting, by moving my fingers, I actively worship, pray, and my sustenance is given as a result of my worship, my asking. And this is what I understand from active worship. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm confusing worship with something else. Maybe I don't know.
Faraz, your microphone was on. Would you like to make a comment?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum, yes. Is it okay? Right. Jump in. So, partly I'm writing my book, as many of you know, and this 23rd word is very much the center of my concern, or what I'm trying to say, but in an academic way. So I'm saying that, why am I saying that? Well, I'm, saying that to say, help me if you have insights on any part of this 23rd word that you think are interesting. Please write me a short email or message me. I should have taken notes in what you've been saying, but I didn't, just mental notes. So anyway, one thing that I was going to try to put in my words something, and then I wanted to see what your feedback is on this question of the perfection, the human being and related to belief. So mainly we are saying that belief is important, rather crucial, because it makes a difference between being human into this ideal way or being really human in a very low, worst way. So one thing, I guess, just quickly, Birkan was saying one is not human versus human beast, but is it okay, is it acceptable to say that you can still make a difference between, in a more literal sense, like human and animal, but the question really is, human in what kind of way, in a very lowest of the low way, or in a very perfected, excellent way. So that's one thing, that this is talking about excellent humanity versus very low, miserable humanity, worse than animals. Okay, so what is, from this paragraph, this animal comparison with man, if one said that the excellence is if a form of life that is excellent is a form of life that knows compassion. How should we say? That can affirm compassion. Why I say affirm? Because you can know that, this is compassion, but then you discover that actually this compassion ceases to exist. The compassion, you say, God gave life, he's so compassionate, I see that he's compassionate. And then he gave illness and sickness and brutal deaths. There was compassion, but there's a but now. I can't affirm this compassion, because I mean it is not real compassion. It was kind of like a little bit limited, or maybe not even compassion at all. It looked like it, but turned out to be very not compassion. So a form of life where this affirmation of compassion, and so this idea of affirmation of compassion is an excellent form of life. And to the extent human beings take part in this affirmation, or they participate in this affirmation, only to that extent they can be called living an excellent life. In other words, this excellence is not a moral excellence. It doesn't come to inhere. I hope everyone understands by inhere. It doesn't come to reside in the human character so that it's some sort of a moral character excellence. No, it is an excellence that, how shall we say, it is excellent knowledge. It is the knowledge of the affirmation of compassion, or knowledge of compassion, such compassion that can be affirmed as compassion completely, without lack. So this knowing is excellent. Such a knowing is excellent. And to the extent that human beings can, let's say, learn about it or experience it, and that's why the excellent pattern exists already. It is how much of it one would mold, in a way, or how should we say, how much, I don't know how to put it in an academic book, how can I say, so that it is, because, I'm sorry to make it personal, but maybe it is of interest to everyone here that you're finding this text very valuable. Now, if I'm going to talk about this text to the general public out there in some words, maybe it is your interest to, make it as compelling, or as, how can one say it, that it conveys and doesn't misconvey the point about this kind of learning and knowledge being the key to this kind of excellence. My nature and ability is tied to knowing. And so, anyway, what I wish to, I guess, say is that these questions that he says, to know the answers to the questions, these questions are all questions that are in response to something that has already happened. So your first task is to recognize something is already happening, something has already happened, some sort of a life is being administered wisely, some kind of compassion is at work, some sort of graciousness and nurturing is at work already. That is not a matter of me like doing anything. This only is to simply recognize or to know that is this happening, and then to ask, the question through whose. And if I can ask through whose, and I say, well, someone with compassion, someone with gracious, someone wise. To know this, that the compassion of this world that is taking place is on account of a real compassion that exists. To affirm this compassion, this form of life, this how shall we say, form of life, I'm saying because I don't want to say that once you know, then you know. It's not that kind of knowing. I want to say that it's this, knowledge of compassion exists, and you kind of plug into it, or you, to the extent that you tie yourself to this. I don't know how to say this. You see my trouble. Like, I don't want to say that this is knowledge in the sense that people understand, I know Lincoln was the president of America. Once you know this, like, unless you forget, like, you always know it's there. So, but this questions ought to be asked about something already happening, and then to participate in that knowledge of compassion existing. That's excellent. That's my, so, it's called human excellence, but actually really it's an excellent pattern of existence where real compassion exists affirmatively without lack. This is an excellent pattern, and human beings can learn it, and to the extent this learning, human beings exist, in a form of life which is excellent. But it is not something that the excellence doesn't come to attach to the human. It is attached to that knowledge or learning, which is. So if I say what I said, maybe slightly more concisely, do you think that will be something, worth saying in a book, or just worth for anyone to read, including yourselves or people you know? I don't know.
First of all, Jazakallah khair, thank you for thinking that we are worthy of your questions. So if you don't mind, I'm really trying to understand when you say it's not there to attach to human, but do you mean it's something that I don't acquire, it doesn't become, it doesn't belong to me? So I'm just trying to understand this part. I'm guessing that I understood what you say with the knowledge of the existence of the perfection or the compassion and how it makes sense, how it makes difference in one's life. But when you say, I'm trying to understand the part that for the similar thing you said at the very beginning, this excellence is not excellence of the morality, or similarly that this perfection or knowledge is not to be attached to human. So what do you mean exactly with this part? Maybe more in some examples maybe.
I think I understand what you're saying. I would just say, I think you understand correctly. Maybe in our halakha language we say, like, if I were to say, oh, now I know that it is God's compassion through which my life is being nurtured. I know this now. Look how excellent I am. Now I'm a true human being. All these people who don't know that God is nurturing them are really beasts and animals. I am a true human being now. So this, so because of course you have access to the 30th word and other places, or just generally nobody in the halakha would allow anyone to kind of make that claim. But when to the general public, if you say, the excellent in this knowledge, and it's assumed that, well, knowledge is people's knowledge. So I know, and once you say, oh, the excellence, this knowing this is really makes you excellent human being, then it can be taken sort of in that egotistical way of, also as my knowledge increases, my excellence increases. And the one who is very knowledgeable, has become very excellent. And I don't want to say that. I don't want to say being, hi, Isa. Hi. So I don't want to say that, and I will explain that also. But I want to say that this excellent pattern, excellent form of life is related to knowing, and this knowing is something that happens in response to human questions, to the extent that they can see through whose compassion this nurturing has happened. These are human questions, and to the extent that they would know this, and so how do I say, like, how we will say how they would manifest this knowledge, but I want to say participate in or connect with, or so I can sort of I want to say, like, the knowledge that compassion exists is an excellent thing. All right, but I want to call it a thing. It's out there, outside of human being for now. If you can imagine it as a bubble, let's say, floating in the air. And this bubble, there is knowledge that compassion exists, and this makes this bubble really excellent. And now, I will sort of plug into this knowledge, and as much as I receive it in response to my question at any given moment in my life, to that extent, this bubble knowledge of compassion existing will transfer me some of to me that or I will start to benefit from it, but the excellence will remain in the bubble. It doesn't transfer to me. It doesn't become my property. It's just, you can call it an excellent form of life. It's an excellent form of life. Excellent. Yeah, I don't know if I'm making sense, but how do you say this? But I think you understand, right?
No, I would just say yes. Like after the second round, I guess it's more clear to me. Yes, and I'm thinking maybe I don't know what you are saying is related to the sentence. This means that man came to this world to be perfected by means of knowledge and supplication. So as if this being perfect is he's using this passive form. I don't know whether it's just a translation issue or not, but and there's this supplication part. I'm not sure, but yet I think yes, I have a clearer idea now.
Hatice Beyza Nurbanu, go ahead, please.
Faraz abi, I thought of the forms in Plato when you talked about participating in it, but it having its own kind of objective existence. And if that's kind of how you mean it, I think it makes sense. In that, like, there's this form, right, of beauty, let's say, and things can participate in it, but it doesn't make them theirs, or it doesn't take away from the objective form of the beauty that's there. But it does have a transformative effect. So the lover of wisdom, or the philosopher, in participating in the form of getting knowledge, is in a way freeing or beautifying his soul so that he can better understand that form. But he doesn't ever, or he can't ever lay claim to that beauty or to that kind of excellence. So I don't know if that's kind of how you mean it, but if the framework is sort of similar, I think you're onto something.
Yeah, thank you, Nurbanu. Yes. Yeah, I guess I didn't consciously mean to say it that way with Plato, but actually, I mean, I guess that's where it will go when I speak like that. Because, so like everyone, we said, so coming to our personal, I'm sorry to insert my book into this, but it's also personal, of course, that this learning, if this knowledge, this is, so if the excellence is related to knowledge and learning in this sort of dynamic ways, so the answer to the question, when do you ask this question, by whose compassion is my life being nurtured? Well, every time that you will look at your life, if you will notice that it's being nurtured, and then you would need to ask, and to the extent that you would gets an answer, to that extent, you would, how shall we say, know compassion. And to that extent, you would have, let's say, attained some sort of an excellence. But if you disconnect, if you don't say, if you don't, are not aware by whose compassion my life is being nurtured, if you don't ask it or you don't answer it, then you lose that excellence. And so this idea of an excellence is not quite as stable and fixed and gradualistic, perfectionist, in the sense that Greek philosophy or even others of this idea of virtue ethics is that, slowly, gradually, you will increase, and this knowledge will increase, and you will become more and more perfect. Although maybe in some parts in Nursi you can say maybe saying that, but then maybe I can even challenge him there, because that doesn't go, that may or may not happen. Like, you might regress, and you might not ask whose compassion is nurturing me, and you might, one day you ask and the next day you don't, and then you assume that's just happening by itself. So maybe one could make the argument even to Nursi that you should have said that this is not a gradual increase. Some people talk about the spiral, where I don't know where, but I guess somewhere he talks about the spiral going up. But that again, I don't know. I mean, I want to say that these questions that, he ties this excellence to the question. He says, is to know the answers to the questions. So the kind of questions he's saying I should know the answer to are the kind of questions that require me to think about actions taking place or at any given point. They are, so they can be read in a way that I will ask once in my life, who administers my life? But earlier in the paragraph, he says, you have to learn all your life to the end of your life. So you can also say that, no, he actually means that I should ask this question every day, or many times every day, or however many times I will ask it, that many times I will get the answer, and that answer, to the extent that that brings me excellent knowledge, or this knowledge of the existence of compassion, will bestow excellence on my form of life. I would live in a way knowing compassion and knowing compassion exists. And that would be the excellent form of life. So in a way, it's not a gradualist picture, a gradualist perfectionist picture where you slowly develop, because that's to me a more standard Sufi picture of, you will slowly get rid of all these different of your nafs, and you will overcome your nafs, and then in the end you will, realize oneness of God. And then, so that's, I think here, if you take maybe Nursi like too literally and too seriously, like maybe even distort him a little bit, you could get away with saying that this is not a gradualist sort of picture. This is a dialogical picture. Every time you might find yourself in and out of perfection much more often than you might imagine or you might like. And so if your goal, if you are sort of looking at Nursi thinking, okay, I'm going to achieve some Islamic perfection or some Islamic Quranic idea of perfection, I'm going to be the perfect human being, well, maybe you will not be very satisfied, or you should be a little bit disappointed, because what he's telling you is there is no such end point that you are to achieve, and it won't be your achievement anyway. This is, anyway, that's kind of what I'm struggling with. Thank you for sharing my struggles. Pray for me. Thank you.
So can we say that the way he defines perfection here is, interestingly, with impotence and poverty? It's something contradictory to what we would normally say in terms of perfection. So as if he says, you can become or the perfection for humanity is defined in terms of recognition of your impotence and poverty.
Yeah. So, but there are other people who say this, but then what they end up saying is that with your poverty, you found God, and that's it. You found God. There's no more poverty now. But to say that you are afloat, you are flying on the wings of poverty, as soon as you imagine that now this poverty, I'm no longer poor, like once and for all, it's like as if you cut your wings. And as soon as you cut your wings, you will fall down. You can't fly anymore. So you have to keep this interesting tension. Or you don't have to keep it, actually. We already find ourselves, Nursi is describing maybe, so that we don't get despaired and disappointed of not being able to reach this perfection after 20 years of following some Sufi tariqa, and then we say, I still don't feel really close to God, so maybe I'd be despair. Or that I just talked about God yesterday, why did I again forget? Why do I need to talk about it again? Or why do I need to, all these people, they are so believers, they just believe in God, they're so happy. Why do I need to reflect, all of that changes that we go through, and we might resent those. I think, Nursi, what I want to say is, it seems like a bleak picture that you will forever keep your weakness and impotence in mind and ready to, again, find yourself there. But that's the point, is that it is not just once that you will find excellence, you will actually repeatedly you can come to it. And so, yeah, so yes, you needy, there's a paradox, you're needy, and through the need you get to power. But I think the question then is, what happens to the neediness and impotence once you know that, through this need, I found my merciful Lord? Then what happens? Is that the end of human experience of human impotence, or no? And if no, then what good was that knowledge? Somebody will say, well, if you're still going to feel impotent again, what's the value of getting that knowledge? And then we would have to say, no, just because it doesn't forever satisfy doesn't mean it doesn't fully satisfy at that moment. And so really, Nursi is saying that human beings have to take their temporality seriously, that you are actually subject to change. You can't ignore that fact ever, because it's not in your power to stop it. Even though you may not like to, you've been given the sense that you should achieve stable, unflinching, undying perfection. But you shouldn't use that desire to criticize your creation. You should use that desire as a sign for an existence where this will be the case. But here, you should use that as a way to continue to depend on guidance or reminder, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't need a reminder. So I don't know if I'm making sense, but yeah, absolutely what you're saying, yes. But I'm just saying that, and then to add to that something even more than what other people have said.
Yes, Hatice Beyza Nurban.
I think I disagree with you, Farzabi, because I think like the knowledge that Nursi, or like the conversation in which we're using the word knowledge, I don't think it means like it's not something that has a negating force, right? Like I don't, or maybe that's not how I understand it. When you're able to fly on the wings of poverty and impotence, you don't suddenly, of course, become competent and capable. Instead, like the knowledge is to then how to react or how to deal with that impotence, right? So the idea is a switch in how you can deal with that. And like in other parts of reading, where we see that like how the worldview changes. And I think like that kind of knowledge has to be gradual, even if it's dynamic, like you said. And I don't think perfection necessarily means or implies stable, right? Because even Nursi here says, he cannot even learn completely the conditions of life in 20 years. He needs to go on learning till the end of his life. So that means, like, even though we've been speaking as if there's this mold, right? Nursi never implies that you actually reach this, right? Like the emphasis is on the process more than this kind of endpoint. And I think that actually works to support what you're saying, in that, of course, it has to be dynamic. Of course, like, it has to fit human nature. One day you can be in complete, maybe, I don't know if it's complete, but you can be very connected and feeling the compassion, as you said. And then one day you can be having doubt. And I think that's completely normal and human. But that doesn't mean every time you ask the question, you reinvent the wheel, right? Because you are coming at it with a different past experience in which you are able to say, this is my creator's compassion. So I feel like just even linguistically, we're always seeing some sort of level or some sort of like ability for progress. And I think that it's probably safe to say that we can acquire, or like the knowledge can be cumulative, even though it doesn't always have to be an upward trend at each step, right? Like, I think on the macro level, it can add up. But of course, in the micro stages, we can, you said, regress. And I mean, even there, right, we can say like what we categorize as a regression can in the macro level can actually be very instrumental to like a bigger understanding or something. But I don't know if that necessarily like made sense, but yeah, that's what I thought of.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I think we're agreeing. I just need to say it in a way that doesn't come across as negating this idea that there is no, that you reinvent the wheel. No, you don't reinvent the wheel, but it's more like the progress and regression happens at the level of the relation. And, your connection becomes stronger or your connection becomes weaker, but nothing in you or in the human changes. The human being is still, with the capacities, with the needs, and everything, those are the same. You don't find a change there. What you do find is, like you said, I would say, not substantive change, but perspective change. And that strength and weakness, or let's say the excellence or the lowliness, happens at the level of that connection. I should locate it in the connection, not in the human. That excellence is really strong connection. Everything's coming through really clearly, and a fuzzy connection. Things are not coming through clearly. And so, yeah, that's maybe one way to say it.
I don't know how much it's related to your discussion, but this reminded me like just an opposite idea. Maybe just to make things a little bit clearer. So we could, for instance, and this is a very common understanding actually, we could claim that yes, the human beings are weak, impotent, because at a certain time point they were cavemen. They didn't even know how to start fire. But then they learn how to start a fire, they become a better man, and they learned how to clothe themselves, how to farm, and then fish, and then so on and so forth. All this accumulation, men becoming better and better. And with every progression, we fulfill one of our desires. And because it's fulfilled, it's not there anymore. now we are given more desires, or we have more desires, and with every progression, with every invention, with every discovery, we sustaining, or we curing, let's say, some of our weaknesses, and they are not there anymore. Right? We inventing all this medicine, we inventing all this technology. Thus, the weaknesses that people had centuries ago, we don't have these weaknesses anymore. We don't have to worry about lions attacking us or the wild animals attacking us. So this is an alternative worldview, which is, I guess, the most common one. And the way I see is Nursi, and if I'm not getting wrong, Faraz, is saying that this is not the case. This is not the case. The progression is not in the form of fulfilling your desires, or it's not the form of curing your weaknesses, but the progression is in the form how much more you realize all your weaknesses and desires are sustained and taken care of in a merciful way. To the extent you realize this, to the extent you ask for your desires fulfilled, you are part of this progression. And this progression doesn't make you stronger. It doesn't make you with less desires or needs, but you realize more and more how they mercifully sustain, and you become more and more thankful. So maybe if there's something is increasing, is the thankfulness that you experience, and the realization of that all your desires and weaknesses or impotences being sustained. There's one who sustains. So this is how I at least understand this weakness part. Rather than by progression, by learning, man uses his weaknesses. There's also something being taught to us. Use your weakness, make them your strengths. So we are aware of our weaknesses, but with every invention, with every advancement of science, we cure some of our weaknesses. We fulfill some of our desires. So this is not what is meant, I guess.
So can we say perfection of human is admission of imperfection? Because when we say acquiring knowledge as if it is adding up, so it looks like as if I am gaining something on top of me. But if this was the path for me, animals are already there. So if I'm going to gain some knowledge, then animals are already there. So what's the point of human getting some knowledge to become as good as animals? So this is why it looks like I will always stay as, so adding up of knowledge is not, I guess, the point in here clearly. So it is more like admitting for myself each and every moment my imperfection, my neediness, and this is what is defined for me as perfection. Because for a bee, perfection is maybe making a perfect honey, whatever. But for human, I mean, now reading it, I mean, this might be a maybe not what was being discussed. So for human, perfection is not, in this context at least, not making an aeroplane or a rocket that takes us to Mars. But it is more, because it is pretty much like what animals are doing. So if I consider this in itself as my perfection, animals are already doing such a thing. But for myself, my perfection is recognition of my neediness and imperfection, even when I am sending a rocket to the Mars or whatever. At every single moment, this has to be the case. And when Faraz was saying, if I cut these wings at any moment, saying that now I am done. So I recognized my neediness. So I guess this is being cutting the wings, if I understand Faraz correctly. Then, yeah, I am again back to square zero. So there I started already, and no perfection in there. So there seems to be this, what was the word Faraz used? The stress or no?
Tension.
Tension. So I'm not sure if it is going to be a tension, if I can find peace in my neediness and being constantly provided. So is it really going to be a tension? But at least intellectually, there seems to be a constant contradictory state. But it being intellectually contradictory, does it make it, in terms of feelings, is it really something contradictory? I guess this is another issue.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry, I have to go. I just want to clarify for others too. So as we are saying, I don't want to say it's contradictory, I want to say it's dialogical. For example, like you said, Yusuf, if I say I perfectly recognize my imperfection and neediness, that's another perfection. That's another kind of claim to perfection. So if I want to avoid, if I want to stay away from claiming perfection, if I want to be needy and impotent, if I want those as my wings, then it would be contradictory for me to say I perfectly have realized my imperfection. So I cannot go there. So therefore I should say that this is, if these are indeed my wings, and my practical experience is like this too, that always there is this dialogic. I will recognize my imperfection. On these wings, I can fly to imperfection. Then I recognize my imperfection, I will fly to imperfection. Through this imperfection, I will fly to perfection. So this is my state, and this is the excellent, let's say, of patterns. So therefore, I cannot consistently then claim I can perfect my recognition of my imperfection. That it's not mine to perfect. It is knowledge, and this knowledge is not my property. So it is, my understanding is also something that I need. So my lack of understanding, my ignorance, my forgetting, is also that wing on which I will fly to the understanding. So that's I just wanted to say that I can never perfect. I shouldn't imagine that there's a perfection my admission of my imperfection. I want to argue that that's not how we should read here, Nursi. So I'm agreeing with you. Thank you.
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.